What's up, Algebra? It'll be good that this is not your first experience with this. Like, you've already seen the regular math video lesson, so this will hopefully be a piece o' cake. Here's your note packet. 2.5 is literal equations and formulas. So here's what I can tell you. I debated whether to give you some more time on 2.4 on some example problems. I figured it'd be more beneficial to do that while I'm actually there. So, I'm not ignoring some of the issues that we had. I just would rather do that in person. So we're going to kind of try to forge ahead a little bit, hopefully without confusion. And if we need to, for the rest of the week when I get back, we can simply concentrate on this and the previous lesson. Clean up, what needs cleaning up, tie up loose ends, all that stuff. So, I don't know. Actually, like, part of the reason why I'm moving forward is this is a little bit more abstract lesson. So, typically what happens is if you have somewhat or even a good understanding of this, it can actually help you when we go back and look at the other stuff. So, the I can statement for today is I can rewrite and use literal equations. I don't know why I'm doing this instead of typing it, and formulas. So here's the deal. Formulas can be rewritten depending on what I'm trying to find, which variable I'm trying to solve for. So, long story short, vocab. A formula is an equation that states a relationship between values. And what that means is, if you look at these examples here, hopefully you've seen all, if not most, of these before. Most, if not all. Said that backwards. It's late. So my mind's a little scrambled right now. Perimeter of a rectangle, P equals 2L plus 2W. That might, you might need a refresher there. Circumference of a circle, C equals 2 pi r. Area of a rectangle, area equals length times width. Triangle, 1/2 base times height, area of a circle, pi r squared. Distance equals rate times time. I don't know. Temperature, if I'm going to calculate Celsius given the Fahrenheit, it's 5/9 times the difference of the Fahrenheit temperature minus 32. So I'm sure you've seen at least half of these, probably, most of them, again, if not all. So the idea here is, let's say I wanted to rewrite this guy for r. I wanted to solve r equals blah, 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 whatever. I'm going to use inverse operations to move the different pieces away from the r variable so that r stands alone. So you're going to use the rules of algebra, inverse operations, in order to do that. It sounds maybe harder than it really is, but that's why we do the work. So rewriting a literal equation. The equation 10x plus 5y equals 80, where x is the number of pizzas and y is the number of sandwiches. Models the problem in the solve it. We didn't look at the solve it, but I'll take their word for it. How many sandwiches can you buy if you buy 3 pizzas and then if you buy 6 pizzas? Okay, great. So x is the number of pizzas, which means I'm going to substitute these two values in, one at a time to solve the two different equations. So first part, 10 times 3 plus 5y equals 80. Hopefully you see where this is going. 10 times 3 is going to be 30. Right? Oops, sorry, 80. 10 times 3 is 30, so I got 30 plus 5y. I'm going to subtract 30 from both sides. That's going to give me 5y equals 50. And I'm going to divide both sides by 5, and that's going to give me y equals 10. So I should be able to buy 10 sandwiches when I'm buying 3 pizzas. 10 sandwiches. It's a weird place to be able to buy pizzas and sandwiches. Maybe not. Maybe pizza places have sandwiches. I don't know. I typically don't buy a sandwich from a pizza place. Do you? I don't know. What about 6 pizzas? All right, same idea. Put 6 in for x instead of 3. So 10 times 6 plus 5y. So everything's going to be basically the same in terms of solving this. Now I'm going to get 10 times 6 equals 60. I apologize for the handwriting. This is not the easiest program in the universe to use. Subtract both sides by 60, that gives me 5y equals 20. Divide both sides by 5, that gives me y equals 4 sandwiches. So typically that's what happens with these, is as one variable increases, the other one's going to decrease, or vice versa. This is 4 sandwiches for the second part. This is an intro, meaning that we're kind of going to show you how to solve these types of problems given specific numerical values for the variables, and then we're going to look at, well, what if it was, how would you solve it no matter what? I don't give you numeric value. So they get right to it. Solve the equation 4 equals 2m minus 5n for m. So when it says solve it for m, what it means is that it wants it to be m equals everything else, blah, 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 on the other side. Okay? And then what is the value of m when n equals -2, 0, and 2? So what's going to end up happening is, after you have this equation solved in terms of m, is what they call it, you'll be able to simply substitute in and calculate everything on the right-hand side. So here's what happens. I want to solve for m, which means I want to move everything else away. But wait, I have this n value and I don't know what it stands for. That's okay. I'm going to treat it as if it were its own variable, which it is. So this is a subtraction problem. I'm going to go ahead and add 5n to both sides. When I do that, remember we talked about commutative property before. It could be 4 plus 5n on the left. It could be 5n plus 4 on the left, because of the commutative property. It really makes no difference. So for all intents and purposes right now, we'll just leave it as 4 plus 5n. That's fine. On the right-hand side of the equal sign, this cancels, right? So I just have the 2m, all right? And I want to solve it in terms of m, which means I want to divide the 2 away. When I do that, I'm essentially dividing it on the entire left-hand side. So here's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to flip the whole thing over so that I have m equals 4 plus 5n over 2. 4 plus 5n over 2. Now we could get into the semantics of, you could divide both of these things individually by 2. 4 divided by 2 would be 2. And you'd have 5 halves n. I would leave it like this. This is perfectly fine, because then it's a little bit easier to substitute in. So let me do this part mentally. -2 goes in for n, right? 5 times -2 is -10. 4 plus -10 is -6. -6 divided by 2 is -3. So the value for m when n is -2 is -3. Zero. Okay, 0 goes in there. 5 times 0 is 0. 4 plus 0 is 4. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So the value for m when n equals 0 is 2. And then positive 2. 2 goes in here. 5 times 2 is 10. 4 plus 10 is 14. 14 divided by 2 is 7. So there are the respective, whoops, there it is. There are the respective mic values when November is those following things. So in terms of, I could write these as ordered pairs, that'd be fine. -3, -2, 2, 0, 7, 2, that'd be great, but the reality is all I need is this right there. Hopefully that wasn't too earth-shattering. If you need to review that, just like we did earlier, pause the video, rewind, play it back. If not, let's move on. Okay, so the thing to keep in mind here, you're going to have to do basically any and all operations and or properties moving forward. So you can see there's an x value there and there's an x value there. So it says, what equation do you get when you solve ax minus bx equals c for x? Right now I don't know what a is and I don't know what b is. So makes it a little bit challenging, but here's the thing. See how there's an x in both of these? What I can do is I can actually do the inverse of the distributive property, which is called factoring, I'm going to factor out an x. So if I consider that ax means a times x, I'm hoping you've seen this before. Bx means, well, I forgot to put my thing in there, bx means b times x equals c. So what I'm going to end up doing is what we call factoring out. Factoring is dividing. I'm going to divide out an x and put it on the outside. It's the reverse or inverse of the distributive property. And I'm going to put it outside of a set of parentheses. So I'm going to have x on the outside of a set of parentheses with a minus b on the inside, because those are the two things that are being multiplied by x, right? If I did the distributive property, I would share the x with the a, I would share the x with the b, and it would take me right back here to ax minus bx. So I'm just undoing the distributive property, if you will, and equals c is the same. Now, what am I supposed to be doing here? I'm supposed to be solving for x. So x is being multiplied by this quantity, which means if I divide both sides by that quantity, then I'll be able to isolate x. And to me, it makes no difference if you have it in parentheses or not. If it makes you feel better, great. Put it in parentheses. It's really not necessary. So you can see that the a minus b is going to divide itself out, and x is going to be left over. So what equation do you get? I get x equals this that I have on the right side over here. So c on top, a minus b on the bottom, and I'm done. That is the literal equation for this situation for x. Okay. It's a little bit abstract, so hopefully that makes sense to you. What equation do you get when you solve negative t equals r plus px for x? Okay, this one is a tiny bit more complicated because there's several different operations going on. So the moral of the story is, if I want to solve an equation for x, that means by the end of things, x needs to be isolated by itself, and all the other letters and numbers and blah, blah, blah needs to be on the other side. So here's an addition problem, right? So the first thing I'm going to do to move things away from the x is to subtract r. Don't forget, r plus px is the same as px plus r. Commutative property says I can flip-flop those two, right? And it's not going to change the answer. So I'm going to subtract r from both sides to get that to be, balanced now. So I got negative t minus r equals px, because subtracting r from that cancels. Now what? P times x, right? So I want x to stand alone, which means I need to do the inverse operation of that, which is divide by p. I'm going to divide by p on both sides. So p's out of the picture. X equals whatever I have going on over here, negative t minus r over p. You could also, depending on the way that you subtracted it, you could have flip-flop these around and have negative r minus t. Doesn't matter. Does not matter. Okay. But there's my literal equation for that situation. Hoping that makes sense to you. If it doesn't, please play it back. I'm going to have you do several examples coming up here so that it makes more sense. Please take time. Look over it again if you need to. Problem 3, geometric formulas. Great, I'm doing the same thing. If you need to look back to the first page to remind yourself what the formulas are for these different things, please do that. What is the radius of a circle with circumference 64 feet? Okay, so let me go back and remind myself the formula for circumference of a circle. Ironically, it's the one I circled. C equals 2 pi r. Okay, so what I typically like to do, circumference, C equals 2 pi r is my base formula. All right, so here's what has happened, and you can do this a couple of different ways. It says, what is the radius, which, is kind of implicitly saying, rewrite this equation in terms of r, which, we did that up here. What equation do you get? Blah, 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 solve this for this. I want to solve this equation for r. How am I going to do that? All right, here's the thing. These three things are being multiplied by each other, right? So if I divide 2 away and if I divide pi away, I should have r standing by itself. I'm going to do that all in one shot. I'm going to divide both sides by 2 pi. so that's going to cancel over here. I'm going to be left with r, c over 2 pi on the other side. So r equals c over 2 pi. That's my literal equation solved for r. Now, I have some numerical values that I can substitute in. The first one is that the circumference is 64 feet. So r equals 64 over 2 times pi, which they're telling me use 3.14. So times 3.14. You see where this is going? Bammo. 2 times 3.14 is 6.28, right? So if I divide 64 by 6.28, I should have my answer for my radius. My radius is going to be in feet. And I'm going to go ahead and calculate that. Oops. There we go. That's what I wanted to do. All right. Did it say anything about rounding? If not, I'm going to cut it off. Generally speaking, I think I mentioned this before in the regular math video. It's usually pretty good policy to cut this off at 2 decimal places. So I'm going to say it's 10.19. Oh, round to the nearest tenth, so 10.2. Even better. So it did say to round. So I'm going to round it to 10.2. And it's feet, 10.2 feet. Grab my pen. Awesome. 10.2 feet. I'm done. Ta-da! Rewind that plate back if you need to. What is the height of a triangle that has an area of 24 inches squared and a base with a length of 8 inches? Okay, so area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height. You may have also learned it as base times height over 2. It really doesn't matter which one you use. They're both equally effective. That's really not a good looking H now, is it? They're both equally effective. That's a little better, I guess. You get the idea. What is the height? Okay, so that means this is what I'm looking for. So maybe it's helpful to rearrange this equation for H. 1/2. The inverse of that is 2, and then I'm going to divide by B. So this is going to kind of occur in 2 steps. I'm going to multiply both sides by 2. Why? Because 2 times 1/2 is 1, and it's going to cancel that, right? So I'm going to be left with BH equals 2A. And I want to solve for H because H is the height. So I'm going to divide both sides by B. B's are going to cancel. I'm going to have H equals 2A over B. So twice the area divided by the base equals the height. Now I'm going to substitute. Area of 24 inches, so 24 is going to go in for A. Length of 8, base length, 8 is going to go in for B. So kind of ran myself out of room here. H equals 2 times 24 divided by 8. You see where this is going? 2 times 24 is 48. Divided by 8 is 6 inches. The height is 6 inches. Why isn't it inches squared? Because area is squared. Height is just one dimension, so it's just regular inches, 6 inches. Okay. Try to go at a certain speed there to make it a little bit easier to understand. So again, at any time, please pause the video and go back if you need to. But that's how you do those types of problems. Let's move on to the next page if you're ready. If not, go back and review. It says rewriting a formula, and this is in the context of a word problem. The monarch butterfly is the only butterfly that migrates annually north and south. The distance that a particular group of monarch butterflies travel is shown. group travels. It should say travels. Stickler for grammar. It takes a typical butterfly about 120 days to travel one way. What is the average rate at which a butterfly travels in miles per day? Round to the nearest mile per day. All right, so I don't know if you can catch this on your paper, but it says 1,700 miles. That is, I believe, the total distance. All right. It says the distance is shown, right? So there's the distance, 1,700 miles. I don't know if you can see that. I'm going to go ahead and write it underneath just in case you can't see it for reference. Rewrite. So this is distance, rate, time. Distance equals rate times time. That's on the first page if you need to go back and see that. So D is for distance. That's the 1,700. It takes a typical butterfly about 120 days to travel one way. That sounds like a time. What is the average rate? So it's asking me for the rate. It's asking me to solve for the rate. So basically what that means is rewrite this equation in terms of R. In order to do that, I'm going to divide both sides by T. So R equals D over T. Rate equals distance over time. Science. So I'm going to substitute the values that are given. 17 is the distance. That goes in for D. 120 is the time. That goes in for T. And I'm going to solve that. There's my zero rule. Those are going to cancel. I think it's 15. Let me calculate that. Oops. Where did my calculator go? Did I get rid of it? 170 divided by 12. Okay. Did it say anything about rounding to the 10th? Round to the nearest mile per day. Round to the nearest mile per day. So that means the ones place, the whole mile. So 14, right? The 1 doesn't change the 4. So 14 miles per day. Yes, you need to label it. It's a word problem. 14 miles per day. Okay. Sorry guys, I'm like super tired. Hopefully I'm not boring you to death. Pacific gray whales migrate annually from the waters near Alaska to the waters near Baja California, Mexico, and back. The whales travel a distance of about 5,000 miles each way at an average rate of 91 miles per day. About how many days does it take the whales to migrate one way? So how many days sounds like a time. Here's the rate. Here's the distance. So same formula. D equals RT. However, now instead of finding the R, I'm finding the T, which means I'm going to divide both sides by the rate, and that'll make life really easy for me to be able to find the time. Distance, I'm going to substitute in. Let's go sideways. 5,000. 91 miles per day is the rate. About how many days? So I'm going to assume it wants me to round to the nearest whole day. You can see that this is probably going to be in the 5 neighborhood. Oops, I keep doing that. I don't mean to. What do we got? Whoops. 5,000 divided by 91. Yeah, it's about 5 days. Oh, 54 days. 55 days even. 55 days. My mental math was off there. So I'm going to round that up to 55. 55 days. About how many days? 55 days. It's 11:54 p.m. I'm tired. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense to you. This bar is a little different also. This is called a lesson check. Instead of you doing like a certain amount of problems on your own, we do the lesson check, and then you do your independent practice, your homework on your own. So why don't you take at least 4 minutes, 1 minute per problem, at least 4 minutes and knock this out. Pause the video while you're working. When you're done working, come back and check the answers with the video, and then we can move on. Alright, so I looked at these and I was like, yeah, let's do these one example at a time because I'm going to run out of room. So number 1, solve the equation 4x plus 2y equals 12 for y. That means manipulate inverse operations to get y by itself. And what does y equal if x equals 2 and if x equals 5? So if I subtract both sides by 4x, that gives me 2y equals 12 minus 4x. And then divide everything by 2, gives me y equals 6 minus 2x. So this is the first part. Solve the equation for y. And then if I substitute x equals 2, 2 goes in there. 2 times 2 is 4. 6 minus 4 is positive 2. So that's my first answer. And then it says to substitute in x equals 5. So 5 goes in there. 2 times 5 is 10. 6 minus 10 is negative 4. Those are my two answers for that one. All right. Now I'm going to move on to the next problem. All right. So what you've got here is, I'm just going to highlight it for a second. So you see how x is a part of both of these. This is the situation where you're going to do the inverse of the distributive property, which is factoring. You're going to factor out an x, so that x is going to come out. This x is going to come out, and that gives you x on the outside with what's remaining inside parentheses, t minus u on the inside. So x on the outside times parentheses t minus u. After that, you're going to divide both sides by that t minus u because they want you to solve for x, which means have x by itself. So when you divide both sides by the t minus u, it gets canceled here. You divide it on the right, and that leaves me with x equals v over t minus u. All right. Perfectly content to discuss this again tomorrow if you don't understand the fine details of it. So it's really no problem. I don't expect you to have it mastered today. Just kind of exposing it to you to give you a basic idea. Number 3, what is the height of a triangle? Oh, excuse me. With an area of 35 inches squared and a base of 10. So area of a triangle, 1/2 base times height, or base times height over 2 if you do it that way. It really doesn't matter. So it gives me the area and it gives me the base, which means I'm solving for the height. What is the height? So typically I'm going to go ahead and reorganize this in terms of h. Multiply both sides by 2 to get rid of that. That gives me 2a equals bh. Divide both sides by b to get it away from the h. So what that gives me is h equals 2a over b. And then I'm going to substitute some numerical values. Right. The area is 35, so 2 times 35. Base is 10. 2 times 35 is 70. 70 over 10 is 7. So 7 inches. That's my height. Okay, just a second. I'm going to erase and do number 4 so that you can check it. Alright, so this is another one of those scientific formulas that you may or may not be familiar with. It was back on the first page, so if you need to look back to check, that's fine. C for Celsius equals 5/9 times the quantity F for Fahrenheit minus 32. So that's the conversion rate from Celsius to Fahrenheit. It asks what the temperature is in Fahrenheit if it's 50 Celsius. So all I did was rewrote the formula in terms of F. So multiply both sides by 9/5 to clear the fraction. That gives you 9/5 C equals F minus 32. Add 32 to both sides, and that gives you this situation right here. F equals 9/5 C plus 32. So the Celsius value of 50 degrees gets substituted in for C. That gives you 90, because 50 over 5 is 10, times 9 is 90. I add the 32 and I get 122 degrees Fahrenheit. Pretty hot. 122 degrees Fahrenheit. Alright, so typically here's what would happen after this lesson check, so to speak. I don't know how that was for you, obviously, because I'm not there. So If it was troublesome and you're like, oh my gosh, I have no idea, that's fine. It's okay. Um, I don't expect you to have it mastered right off the bat. Here's what I would recommend you do. You have your choice, one of two things. Homework 11 through 32 on page 112, or take a look at the IXL skills on Algebra 1 J9. All right, hopefully that will help you a little bit. I would recommend using your notebook with that. And obviously I'll be back tomorrow to clarify anything that didn't make any sense. All right, so we'll see you guys tomorrow. Hope you have a great day. Please do your best.